bike a couple of weeks back, and I've been riding it to class because it's cheaper, more efficient, less annoying than taking public transportation. The downside to this is it does take me about an hour and a half to get home at nights because I have to walk straight uphill for most bits, and I'm still not back to being good enough at biking to actually bike up those hills, except maybe halfway if I'm lucky. So I saw Saturday or Sunday that it was going to rain on Tuesday, and I have class on Tuesdays. That's my only day I have class. I'm like, no, I don't want to take public transportation. I decided in the morning that it was not raining yet, so I rode my bike in the morning. Got to class, no rain, no problem, fine. It's all good. And I walked back home in the afternoon after class, and it took me like an hour and 15 minutes. I'm like, this is cool. I'm doing fine. I can totally... It didn't rain at all. It was getting a little windy. So I got home and I'm like, oh, it's going to be too windy to ride my bike back to class. It's going to be too windy. It's going to rain. And so I'm thinking this the whole time. And then I really, really, really didn't want to load money onto my public transit pass, and I really didn't want to ride public transportation again. So time for class rolls around, and I'm like, I'm gonna ride my bike. So I rode my bike. Got there in plenty of time. It was starting to spit a little bit of rain as I got to class. But I'm like, I'll be fine. Get out of class, pouring down rain, which was to be expected, really. But I was under the impression that you could take bikes on the underground transportation in San Francisco. So pouring rain, can't hold an umbrella and a bike at the same time. Tried that. Tried riding the bike and holding the umbrella at the same time. Crashed into a dumpster. Not my brightest hour. So I'm like holding the bike, holding the umbrella, walking along. I get to the thing, the stop for the underground transportation thing, and it's like 10 minutes to the next one, the one that takes me straight home. So I went to the other one, and it was arriving. So I got up there with my bike, completely empty train, and the guy's like, oh, you can't take bikes on here. And I'm like, there's no one on the train. Why? I'm not disturbing anyone or anything. And he's like, I make $87,000 a year. If I let you take the bike on there, they'll look on the camera and see. I'm like, fine. So eventually he's like, no, go ahead, you can take it on there. But I didn't want him to get fired, was my chief thing. And then I thought about it later, and I'm like, well, it's a good thing I didn't take the train, because I would have had to transfer. And then I would have had to deal with the same thing with my transfer and getting the bike out of the underground station, and it wouldn't have been worth it anyway. But what comes next is the kicker, because instead of that, I proceed to kind of walk around in circles crying, trying to figure out how I'm going to get home. And at one point I decided I would bike home, and I got a little ways, like less than a quarter block, and I'm like, no, I can't do this. So I bike with the umbrella, and I'm trying to cross the street to try and catch a bus or to look at a map or something. I forget exactly what it was. And I'm holding my umbrella in my hand, but it's very cold and wet, and I let go of the umbrella somehow because I can't remember what happened. It's all a blur. But the umbrella starts floating across the street because it's very windy. When it rains in San Francisco, it does not simply rain, it tempests. So it's blowing across the street somewhat like this, head over heels, and it's my only umbrella. So I'm like, I need to get that umbrella. And I catch it under the wheel of my bike, and I grab it, and then somehow I lose it again, and it starts blowing. And this time, I bent the handle, I think, at this point. So at this point, though, I'm thinking, that umbrella is going to cause an accident, because it's blowing like, and it's going to get caught on somebody's windshield or something, and they're not going to be able to. So I'm like, not for myself. I just need to get this umbrella so that I don't kill someone. So I'm running across the street. I'm not even sure if it's my turn to go, if it's a walk or not, but I'm getting that umbrella. So I kind of ram it with my bike and bend it all to pieces, although it's actually still fairly functional after all this happened, so I'm amazed. But I grab it, get across the street, and I'm already starting to be soaking wet, but I get to the bus thing, and for some reason, I decided to take my iPod with me. Can't listen to my iPod while I'm biking. I'm not sure. I think originally when I left the house, I was thinking I'm take public transportation and I'll use my iPod and it'll be cool. So I get across there and I realize my jacket is completely soaking wet. My iPod is going to be soaking wet if I leave it unprotected, so I put it in my umbrella cover, which is probably the smartest thing I did that whole day, because it actually kept my iPod dry, whereas in the other pocket I had my bus transfer later and it was like completely soaking wet. At this bus stop, I decided there was absolutely no way to get home, and I figured my best bet was to find somewhere where I could leave my bike and take the underground home. So I called my old roommate, who I owe so many favors to that it's not even funny. And I'm like, hey, frantic voice, frantic voice, frantic voice, can I keep my bike at your house? And she has class that evening, I believe. So it wasn't something I had thought through entirely. And I'm like, can I keep my bike at your house? And her house is an apartment. There are so many things wrong with what I suggested. And she's like, tonight? And I'm like, no, never mind. Hang up. Still completely lost as to what to do. So I went and asked the people at the front desk of the school, hey, what bus do I take back to Forest Hill, Twin Peaks? And this one girl, who I don't know what her exact position there was, but she's like, oh, to where? And then she starts this whole other conversation with someone clear down the hall, and I'm like, so I asked the security guard, and the security guard gave me all these instructions, which probably would have made sense were I not flustered and confused and me. So I decided to take his instructions, and I try to make my bag road ready because it's a little cloth bag, and I've got like paper stuff and a book and everything else in it, and so I wrap it up. And then I had to bike like 4 or 5 blocks down to Market Street, and then from there hopefully catch one of these 3 buses. And so I get to Market Street, and one of the buses, like, it's half an hour till the next bus comes. So I'm freaking out, and I rode down to the next stop even, and then I figured out that one of the buses actually was coming soon. So I get on this bus with a lot of trouble, and there are these 2 women that had just come out of the opera. I don't know, maybe they were having a conversation with each other about riding the bus, but I'm pretty sure what they said was, what's the matter, never ridden a bus before? A school bus, maybe. So, I'm having loads of fun, and I have to load my bike onto the front of the bus, and I can't get this wet, slippery metal post up over my wheel, so I'm afraid the bike's going to fly off the front of the bus, and I'm going to be sighted or something. Finally get it on there, ask the guy if this is the bus I can transfer to 43 from, and he's like, that was his exact response, silence. I get on this bus anyway, hoping it will be the right one. And I have this lovely altercation somewhere halfway through Haight Street, where I'm standing holding onto the post because it's a packed bus, this one. And this woman's like, move, knee through! So I moved out of the way for her, and then I'm standing here and exchanging glances with some of the other people who thought she was a little rude, and all of a sudden I hear, out of the way! And I turn around and there's this kid that's about 1.5 feet high that just yelled at me like that. I'm like, this is definitely my day. And I'm still soaking wet. I was so wet, like there was a seat available at one point and I didn't want to sit down because I was so wet I didn't want to wet up the bus seats. And I'm watching for streets and I hear the bus driver say something at this one stop that sounds something like 43. So I pull the cord and it does nothing. And I wait a little while, and then the next stop, which is maybe 2 blocks up, I ask the bus driver, was that the stop for 43 back there? And he says, I called it out. Very quietly, granted. But yes, he did call it out. I will admit to my faults there. So I get on the bike and try and ride back up to the 43 stop, and as I'm riding, these guys start making fun of my bike and its pinkness and my littleness, and I cuss them out, which is something that I don't generally do, but I was not in the right mindset to deal with their stuff. But for some reason, when I cuss at people, which has only happened a few times in my life, they tend to make fun of me for it more so than actually like, oh, she has a mouth on her, I'd better stay away. They just use it as another making fun of point, but for some reason I tend to forget that every time I'm faced with a situation yet again. So I get up to where I think this 43 stop is going to be, and there is no 43 stop. There is a 33 stop and a something else stop. So I'm a little bit confused, and it says 43 is 2 blocks up, so I go 2 blocks up, there's no bus stop there. So that was always good. So from this point, I just start walking up and down Haight Street, trying to find a bus stop, and I don't find one. So I go into a convenience store, and I ask the people there, do you know where 43 stop is? And he responds, no, I've never ridden a bus in my life, which is a slightly different answer than the question I'd asked, but I'll let it slide. So I leave and keep wandering up and down Haight, and I come across another person, another store that's open, because there aren't a lot, because it's like 11 o'clock at night, and in this store the people still don't know where the 43 stop is, and there's some discussion, and eventually this cab driver, who happened to be in purchasing something, offers to give me a cheaper ride home. Because see, what happened was, I'm asking for directions and they don't know directions, I started crying again because I'm so frustrated, which is, I'm not sure if that's a word, but it's a cross between flustered and frustrated, and it's accurate. The guy offered to give me a cheaper cab ride, and he did, and he ended up making it free, and I got home and I didn't die, and thank goodness for people. And whereas there were some terrible people that evening, there were also people nice enough to give me a free cab ride home. So if anyone needs a huge favor, I am indebted to the world, because I do stupid, irrational things on a regular basis.